Let's see here. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with this dude. This is Michael Burns. He's the guy who runs the Wisecrack YouTube channel. I think he's the main presenter of it. And I used to kind of like that channel because it sort of would dive into the philosophy that was behind, certain shows, certain movies, or certain works of literature or fiction. But now it's a heavily ideological YouTube channel that goes beyond just breaking down the philosophies that you see in shows and movies, but has now sort of transformed into sort of like a soapbox for him to talk about politics, Michael Burns, which is interesting because he has his own channel here where you would think that'd be more appropriate for him to do the same thing. But no, if you go to Wisecrack, he's got these streams that he does now where he literally, hold on, let me see. He's got these streams now where he literally just talks about politics. So this is not new, by the way. This is like something that's been going on for I think at least a year. Like sometimes, yes, he goes and talks about like the philosophy that's in a movie, such as like how Christians took over politics, God's Not Dead 5. That's fair. But like things like what happens if the economy grows forever and things like that. Or the left abandoned DEI, what comes next is dangerous. Like these types of things are not under what at least I had come to know Wisecrack for. I thought it was like a primarily, Wisecrack is a collective of academics, filmmakers, artists, and pop culture junkies who are curious and contemplative about the world around us. Our channel explores big ideas like philosophy and critical thinking through the lens of movies, TV shows, video games, and current events, and more. This must not have been updated in years because that's not what they do anymore. The Wisecrack channel, as most people I think used to know it in the olden days, has died, and now it's become something very different. Lots of people seem to like the very different thing that it has become. I'm not the biggest fan because I'm not the biggest fan of Michael Burns's ideology, but at least people kind of are still down with it. But anyways, I wanted to react to this video. This video, the main reason I wanted to react to it was because initially this video was called Elon Musk and Evangelicals Hate Empathy. That's what it used to be called. And so I'm like, okay, well, I am an evangelical, one would say. I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. So interesting to see why he thinks that Christians hate empathy, but it seems he has changed his mind because the title now says the real reason conservatives hate empathy, which is true, by the way. And I have an explanation for that as well. I'm wondering actually if he has come to the same conclusion than I have on this, but I'll just let his video play out here.
Empathy is bad. Hell, it might even be...
Wait, hold on. What do you use there?
Empathy is bad.
Empathy is bad? This is using a title from Secular Talk, which is a left-wing content creator, but, Kyle Kalinske. But actually, he's kind of accurate there. So I do want to mention that here. Kind of interesting to see where he goes with this.
Empathy is bad. Hell, it might even be a sin. At least according to Elon Musk, who in a recent interview with muscular intellectual Joseph Rogan said that we are experiencing civilizational suicidal empathy. And for Musk, this is largely because...
Now, the interesting thing is he is accurate, but leftists are also accurate when they said that conservatives hate empathy. And I'll explain why later on, but they're both kind of right. You have to strike a balance.
Empathy at the individual level is costly to the collective, or put differently, empathy for people is costly for corporations. An example that Elon Musk gives is empathy for...
Where do you get that from?
At the individual level is costly to the collective, or put differently, empathy for people is costly for corporations.
Put differently, that's for sure. That's for sure. I want to say this guy is like, he's one of those like more radical anti-capitalists, right? I think that's one of the things that sort of like irked me. Whenever people start saying like, oh, what was it called? Late stage capitalism, whatever, it's a big red flag. They're going to get a low IQ political take. That's generally... and that's generally one of the trademark signs that, oh, you are in left-wing extremist territory when you're listening to political commentary.
Costly to the collective, or put differently, empathy for people is costly for corporations. You know, an example that Elon Musk gives is California providing medical insurance to undocumented folks. I mean, listen to this shit. He says, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, the empathy exploit. He goes on to say that they're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response.
Western civilization, that's not true. It's not Western civilization. It's humanity. And that's why that's why it's been exploited so constantly and consistently throughout history across governments of all different types of leanings and styles. Like, you have to appeal to emotions if you want to win. And this is why Democrats, for quite a while until Trump burst on the scene, were sort of viewed as the dominant force in American politics, is because the primary drive of the left wing, for the most part, seems to be, at least in as far as what they argue, emotion. They lead with appeals to emotion when you listen to their argumentation. And that's how they're led. Now, that's what Donald Trump did in 2016, where it's like, America should be great, right? Rah, 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 patriotism. And so then with that, appeal to emotion as well, he sort of swept up the nation into the whole MAGA frenzy. So, it's not a bug in Western civilization. This is just how God built humans to be empathetic to each other. And if you say, hey, it's empathetic, if you support this political policy, and you will automatically become a good person, or at least better than the people who don't support the political policy. Buy into that narrative, and then that's a golden ticket to 10, 15 years of political power.
They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response, and that empathy has been weaponized. And don't worry, because the right-wing evangelicals are talking about this one too. And there are some right-wing theologians who are legit arguing that empathy...
The sin of empathy? I thought that was a parody, because I've been hearing left-wingers online talk about the sin of empathy. I thought that was a parody. Is that real? Hold on, wait a second. The sin of empathy. The sin, hold on, wait a second. Let me look this up here. The sin of empathy. If this is a real book, then it's probably on Wikipedia, right? Oh, this is real. This is from Canon Press. I think, aren't they conservative or something? Meet empathy, the greatest rhetorical tool of manipulation in the 21st century. I mean, true. Because love is a real virtue, empathy's power is in posing as selfless care for victims. A sad polar bear paces as David Attenborough informs you that the family suburban is melting the ice caps. Jesus was an asylum seeker, the sign reads at an open borders rally. Yes! This is all true! This is, yes, this guy is nailing it, whoever it is. A forlorn Bruno wishes he too could change in the women's locker room, a place where he's always known he belonged. Yo, this is great. Wait, my mom said if we don't go, she'll just be devastated. When you reject the sin of empathy, you reject the manipulation of the media, the manipulation of family and friends, and most importantly, the manipulation of your own heart. This looks like an amazing book, actually. This looks like the type, as a kid, I was homeschooled. One of the books I had to read was some book of logical fallacies, and I found it extremely educational. This seems like sort of a version of that. There is a section in that book that talked about the appeal to emotion, or the appeal to empathy. This seems like a really good crash course in how that's manipulated in American politics. Hold on, let me see. The appeal to emotions, because this is a formal fallacy. appeal to emotion, or argumentum ad passionis, I'm definitely saying that correctly, is an informal fallacy characterized by the manipulation of the recipient's emotions in order to win an argument, especially in the absence of factual evidence. This kind of appeal to emotion is irrelevant to or distracting from the facts of the argument, a so-called red herring, and encompasses several logical fallacies, including appeal to consequences, appeal to fear, appeal to flattery, appeal to pity, appeal to ridicule, appeal to spite, and wishful thinking. I also see this paired a lot with the appeal to authority, right? Like a lot of people on the left, if they can't use this, they'll use appeal to authority. It's like, oh, just trust the experts, right? Or trust the scientists or whatever. I literally was watching a segment, an old segment of Joy Reid debating the Moms for Liberty leader about banning inappropriate books from school curriculums. And Joy Reid's position at the very end was literally saying only sociologists and library scientists are qualified to say what books are appropriate and inappropriate to be included in school curriculums. I'm not joking. That's literally what she actually, hold on. I'm not just going to say that. I'm going to play the clip where she does that. So it's Joy, if you look up Joy Reid, Moms for Liberty. Now, I don't know if they cut this out of the MSNBC version, because I watched the Moms for Liberty version, because I noticed that it had the whole thing. It was 16 minutes long, and this is only 12 minutes long. Is the end on here? Hold on, let me see. I think she literally says like only like sociologists and library scientists should be allowed to say what's included in school curriculums, or what is inappropriate to include in school curriculums.
We believe that that children should be able to read.
Then how can Moms for Liberty insist that the school board take that book away and then say that a parent who wants the child to be able to read it must purchase it? That's essentially putting a tax on parents who want their children to read the book. Your kids get to have books for free that you agree with, but children who want to read, or parents who want their children to read books you don't like, have to purchase it. That doesn't sound fair.
Did you know that in the city that we're sitting in, only a quarter of children are reading on grade level?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And so while we're having this conversation about books in libraries, two things should be happening.
That's a great point.
We should be talking about literacy rates and the fact that America's kids are not learning how to read, and we should be having vibrant conversations about what books should be in libraries.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, they cut that off. They cut off the end, too. Hold on. If you go to this has the actual full segment.
At the heart of America's
MSNBC
culture war
did
lies
not
education.
Upload.
And it's a fight that has intensified in recent years, alongside Florida's Don't Say Gay bill.
So if you look up, oh yeah, hold on, here it is. It's right here.
What a school board would do, you were on a school board, you would hire experts and have expert voices come in,
Parents
and people who are sociologists, people who are library science.
Parents.
Wait, so only sociologists and library scientists should be the ones saying this is inappropriate and this is appropriate for schools. That is the appeal to authority fallacy. So between that and that's basically a nutshell of every single left-wing argument you'll hear, or at least like the most like pervasive and popular ones. So cinema empathy is real. It's just the appeal to emotion fallacy. But it's interesting because this is actually, I'm guessing that the rhetoric that he's going to say here is actually going to be an appeal to emotion fallacy, because everyone thinks that empathy is good, right? We all understand that empathy is a good thing, or it's good to have empathy for people who are different than us, especially, right? Because we can't just only be able to have empathy for people who are similar to us, because then we'd just be cruel and heartless to those who disagree with us or are different than us. And so if you put it like that, it sounds really bad. But if you acknowledge, oh, this is actually the appeal to emotion fallacy, where people are making emotional arguments without factual backing or without using kind of like more logical ways of coming to a particular conclusion, then you have an actual problem. But I think that maybe the title is a little bit unfortunate, and that's going to end up having some very emotional reactions, which perhaps this is going to be one of those.
too. And there are some right-wing theologians who are legit arguing that empathy is actually tricking poor little Christians into like doing woke stuff. I don't know, this shit's crazy. I mean, seriously, can you imagine being like, oh, it's unchristian to have empathy? That's what they're saying. They're saying that it's unchristian to have
Wait, did he read the book? Because what he's saying here is not true. And I don't know if he's lying on purpose or by accident, but it's just not true. We literally read the description of the book from the publicist's website. The book isn't saying that empathy is bad. See, lies like this are very frustrating. It's very hard for me to watch this person because many times a lot of the things that he says, they come off as very dishonest, they come off as very disingenuous, and on top of that, I think he's slightly pompous in how he presents himself. So I'm not a big fan. This is why I unsubscribed from Wisecrack. But this is just a blatant lie that we debunked like 5 minutes ago. What in the world?
Empathy. To be empathetic. They're saying that to be empathetic is unchristian. And there's another
Now,
reason.
it's interesting though, is that I wonder, while he's lying, yes, I wonder how many people on the left have bought into this lie, right? I think it's not entirely wrong to observe media like this or preserve political coverage or analysis like this that is false, that is deceitful, that does not accurately portray the positions of others, because they oftentimes do represent a sizable portion of a certain part of the political aisle. And so if you listen to people who say things like this, even if they're not true, it allows you to have a good handle on what the other side of the political aisle is thinking. And then if you're confronted with some sort of question or whatever, then you have a response rather than being like, oh no, wait, what? My side thinks empathy is bad? Oh no, that's horrible, because empathy is actually good, right? So, the types of things to be aware of. And see, this is how empathy gets weaponized. Well, no, that's not the right way to put it. This is how people use the appeal to emotions to manipulate folks into supporting their own political ideologies. It's weird to me that the right isn't that good at doing this, but there's something that the right does instead, which I'll get to later.
Book written by another right-wing Christian that's called Toxic Empathy.
Well, I must say I don't like Allie Beth Stuckey as well, and that's we'll get into that later. I think I did a stream like 3 years ago talking about how I didn't like her.
It's written by conservative podcaster Allie Beth Stuckey, more like Allie B. Sucky, and it's another book about how leftists.
Left-wing humor. Haha, this is so funny. The left can meme.
Progressives supposedly exploit Christian empathy. It argues cool things like that empathy for migrants is actually unchristian. And the reviews for this one, well, I'm going to let some of these speak for themselves. One reviewer says, a hateful book that doesn't even attempt to disguise its hate for people different from the author. If Jesus...
Okay, to be fair, that I would believe about Allie Beth Stuckey. I would believe that book might be hateful or at least lack empathy. I've heard some of the things that Allie Beth Stuckey says that it actually does track.
Was alive today, people like her would persecute him based on their twisted view of Christianity. Another review says, as a Christian and someone with an IQ higher than I can count on my fingers, this book is objectively horrible. And this one from Jude Yeager says, a pathetic attempt to claim progressives use empathy to bully them while using the modern, hateful nature of Christianity to bully trans women, women who get abortion, and the gay community. And I'm sure that...
Now, the one thing I will say, and hold on, I'm going to look this up. Hold on, let me see here. Because one thing I noticed that he did was that he did not include the popularity of the reviews. Hold on, let me look this up. Okay, so Toxic Empathy. Oh, here he is. View book details. Okay. So if we look at the reviews, the average review is 4. I'm sorry. almost feel like this entire video is going to be a lie, because in the beginning he says that this in the beginning he says that this book is saying that empathy is bad. The first book, The Sin of Empathy, is saying that empathy is bad, which is not what it's saying. It's not its thesis. If you would just read the description of the book, you would find that out. And then here he is cherry picking reviews of the Allie Beth Stuckey book, which, by the way, I don't like Allie Beth Stuckey, but he's cherry picking reviews to make it seem like a bunch of people read it, and then the people who read the book just didn't like it, thought it was hateful, and thought it was horrible. Only showing 1-star reviews. The average review is 4.7 out of 5. How many people gave 1-star reviews? 5%. 5% of the people who left reviews gave a 1-star review. If we go to the to the top reviews, 5 stars. Little book, big challenge, huge encouragement. The second top review, excellent book and demonstrates change in American thinking in America. Customers say, this is from AI, which basically takes a conglomeration of all of the reviews of the book and then basically tries to summarize them. It says here, customers find the book helpful and relevant with biblical references. They describe it as a wonderful, succinct read that makes a compelling case for how empathy pushed too far can be harmful. Right. It doesn't even say that empathy is bad. Just says how empathy pushed too far can be harmful. The writing quality is praised as thoughtful and well written with straightforward scriptural answers. Readers appreciate the heartfelt examples that evoke empathy and how we can approach them. The book is described as helpful and a great tool for Christian friends. The author's language is described as clear and articulate, and providing crucial facts in a compassionate way. This is completely different than how he portrays the book itself using his cherry-picked reviews. This is so bad. And how has no one called him out for stuff like this before? Unless maybe someone has, and I've just been like under a rock. But this is just like such blatant and obvious misinformation that, like, how did he like just post this and think that he could just get away with it? I mean, he's got like, this video has like almost 200K views now. Like, how has no one called this out?
They meant abortions, but they're just like kind of angry. So I want to try to quickly talk
Wait,
about
let me go back here.
Sure, they meant abortions, but they're just fear of Christianity to bully trans women, women who get abortion, and the gay community. I mean, I'm sure they meant abortions, but they're just like kind of angry. So I want to try to quickly talk about why people like this are attacking empathy and how we can use the philosophy.
Jordan Peterson, the problem of too much empathy. My favorite videos from Jordan Peterson are him talking about how empathy is a good thing and it's something to cultivate within yourself. What?
Philosophy of someone like Aristotle to talk about why empathy is actually super useful and even politically important. Now, to put this really simply, the logic of contemporary American capitalism prioritizes
There it is, right? Capitalism is the boogeyman. Capitalism is the monster that is under your bed and inside of your closet.
individualism and notions of individual freedom and liberty at all costs. Now, of course, this type of individual is antithetical to the practice of empathy. If we all have the freedom to do whatever we want and achieve wealth and success, well, why should I have empathy for a homeless person in my community? Empathy, on the other hand...
Huh? That literally does not track. And actually, the principle of freedom is like the only emotional appeal that the right has and uses on occasion. It's like, yeah, I think that person should be allowed to do whatever they want, right? And that person should be allowed to do whatever they want. Matter of fact, everyone should be allowed to do whatever they want, right? Like, that is an appeal to emotion where it's like, oh, what's the harm in letting people do whatever they please? And that's how libertarians get people into their midst. And then I am like, well, I think it's bad for a parent to feed LSD to their baby. I don't, you know, right? Because they're all, you know, so much against like the war on drugs and things. But the emotional appeal to freedom is so commonly used on the right. And like, freedom is an inherently emotional appeal. It's when you strip away emotions and you strip away empathy is when you can start calling for the removal of freedom, right? To take freedom away from someone is not nice. It's not empathetic. So you can't make an emotional appeal that is in support of that. And empathy is not even counter to capitalism necessarily. It's counter to some forms of capitalism, what I used to refer to as hyper-capitalism. I don't know what's referred to as now, but like when it comes to using capitalism in a profit over everything else type of method, then sure, yeah, it can lead to that. But that's like saying that like cars are killing machines. I mean, sure, they can kill some people if they're used a certain way, but that's not the primary way that they're used, and it's not usually how things turn out.
And challenges this type of individualism by asking us to relate to the experiences of those.
And hold on, there's just one more thing I want to point out, because this is also this is also something that the left likes to use. They will say, if you are empathetic, you'll support this particular policy. So I think that what he's probably referring to here is when it comes to the homeless, right? Have empathy for the homeless, right? What he's probably saying is, don't criminalize homelessness, or at least like don't kick homeless people off of like the sides of the street or the road or whatever. Allow the homeless to just build up as many encampments that they want at the very least. If not, forcibly take over hotels and put homeless people inside of them. This is something that has been done before. The left has done this. They've also done this with migrants that they've wanted to import and get the votes up. But it's true. But like, those are the types of things where if you listen to an appeal to emotion from the left, they will say, hey, if you have empathy, you'll support this policy. And if you don't support this policy, you don't have empathy, right? There's a lot of them, they will have this one-track mind where it's like they can't imagine why, if you have empathy for someone, you wouldn't support their political agenda, which is just not true. You can have empathy and support multiple courses of action. But that's not the framework that I think Michael Burns operates under.
This type of individualism by asking us to relate to the experiences of those who are suffering. And when Musk says that there is a civilizational suicidal empathy happening, the civilization he's talking about is, of course, white Western capitalism. The same civilization that a lot of
white Western capitalism? He says the West. The West isn't exclusively or necessarily white. The West typically refers to the United States, refers to Canada, and refers to Europe. It's generally what people think about when they say the West. I think there might be some overlap. Some people might consider Japan to be somewhat Western, but not really. It's mostly, when it comes to values, but still it's mostly Europe, United States, and Canada is what people think of when they think of Western values. And while, yes, America, I think, is mostly white, the white population in the United States, and I believe also Canada, is going down. Not to mention in places in Europe where they're importing all of these migrants and refugees to the point where I don't even think the majority of people in England are white anymore. And, are you still going to say that England is white when it's so diverse at this point? No, because the same criticisms that you would have that Elon Musk would have are affecting England, not just the United States of America.
Evangelical Christians love capitalism. It's weird because these people won't have sex until they're married, but they'll just 69 with capitalism all night with no regrets, thinking that Christ is up there being like, oh yes, good stuff. Rub it till you bust. That was fucked. And empathy is a weakness for someone.
What a weird portion of the. This guy is so weird. What in the world? I didn't even understand everything that he was trying to get out there. But I will say it's actually kind of funny because hold on. Oh, never mind. There's stuff I could go into in depth, but if I go into all of the problems with this video, I'm not gonna get through all of it before midnight. So let's just keep going.
Like Elon, because it stands in the way of pure market forces. For example, giving.
I don't think that's what he was going for. I very rarely heard Elon Musk talk about economic systems or like, market forces and things like that. That's not his primary focus. He's actually mostly focused on, making sure that you're not being wasteful when you're running your business or running the country, decreasing debt, and also a lot of social issues. He cares about a lot, not as much about market forces, from what I can tell. And I don't think that that's the reason he's given for like opposing empathy to a ludicrous degree or being ruled exclusively by your emotions. I don't think he's ever said, I don't like appeals to emotion because they get in the way of market forces, which itself is extremely absurd. Right, bro, the tobacco industry made a fortune off of emotional appeals, okay? It's not true that appeals to emotion always get in the way of market forces.
Healthcare to migrant workers is economically inefficient, or building public housing is bad for real estate developers. I don't know why I'm using finger quotes. This is actually what this is. Bad care to migrant workers is economically inefficient forces. For example, giving healthcare to migrant workers is economically inefficient. Or,
I mean, it is true. I mean, it's something that's very expensive to produce that you're giving away for free. Now, of course, the government will often lie and say, oh, we don't have the money to fund that particular thing, but then they'll just write blank checks to Ukraine. So the argument that we can afford it doesn't really track when they're willing to just like get as much debt as they want. However, it is true that if you are going to exclusively fund healthcare with taxpayer funds rather than taxpayer funds as well as debt, then yes, what you're going to end up having is just continually raising taxes to meet to make sure that all of the workers in the healthcare industry are getting paid for not just taking care of the citizens who can afford healthcare or are paying for it through taxes, but also for the migrant workers who maybe they are getting underpaid, right? Because they're getting paid under the table, so they're not able to pay as much towards healthcare insurance, or B, they are not paying taxes, so in that way they're also not paying into the healthcare system. It is literally true that if you just keep on giving away free healthcare to people, that system will crumble. As much as that kind of runs counter to the left's appeal to emotion, that is how things work. If you've got $1,000 laptops that you just want to give away to free for everyone, guess what? That laptop factory is going to shut down and die. That's just the reality of things. Unless the government is willing to subsidize that industry and just like go into tons of debt, spending all of the money that's required to pay for each and every laptop, that industry is just going to die. That's how it works. You can't just poof create healthcare out of thin air.
Building public housing is bad for real estate developers. I don't know why I'm using finger quotes. This is actually what these people think. Now, in the tradition of phenomenology, which is a type of philosophy, you can Google it. Empathy isn't just like a feeling or a vibe. It's a way that we have an experience of the other. For example, if you tell me that you're hungry because you forgot to eat lunch, I can empathize with that experience because I too have been hungry before. And in imagining what my own hunger felt like, I'm able to empathize with that experience that is not mine. And in this version of empathy, we get a sort of co-being with another that leads to a type of intersubjectivity. And this intersubjectivity conflicts with that spirit of radical individualism. And it can help create a common world that allows us to transcend individual perspectives. And I bring up
so that that is true. Now, I will say that the way that I've seen the right use the argument that like, oh, everything in the pursuit of freedom is good, freedom is the ultimate good or virtue of a society, that when you use that in like the third person, that is the empathetic version of that, where it's like everyone should have freedom to do whatever they want. That's like third person freedom. First person freedom is I should be able to do what I want regardless of how that affects other people. Although I don't think you generally see that in right-wing political policies unless it sort of skews towards Christian nationalism, where it's like, okay, we should be putting like Bibles in churches instead of Qurans, for example. that is generally the only types of right-wing policies that you'll see that will run counter to the more empathetic version of the appeals for freedom, where it's like, let everyone do what they want. Generally speaking, right-wingers will be like, oh, those people, yeah, let them do whatever they want. I mean, maybe not around my kid, but yeah, let them do whatever they want.
Phenomenological understanding, because it reminds us that empathy is way more than just a feeling, which is how the toxic empathy crowd describes it. And I'm going to put a link to an essay on the phenomenology of empathy in the description if you guys want to check that out. You know, this speaks to what...
Wait, so he read an essay about phenomenology, but he didn't read the book about the sin of empathy? Now, I want to be the most charitable to Michael Burns here and assume that he's just, when he was talking about the book, and like, you know, the other things, that he just was misinformed, that he didn't read the book or read the material. He just went off of what some folks had told him, or basically just going off the title of the book, didn't even read the description. I don't want to say that he's willingly lying, because I do think that he's intelligent. I've watched this stuff before, and I don't think that he would have read the book and think it would be reasonable to say what he's saying here. But like, just reading an essay about phenomenology and then not even reading the description of a book called The Sin of Empathy is just like, okay, interesting priorities there.
Empathy is recognizing that the humanity of others is always already interlinked with my own humanity. And this fights against the tendency to make people that aren't like us wholly other, right? Like, I don't have to have empathy for a migrant because that's a totally different type of person than me, or for a trans person, or for a woman, or for someone suffering some type of oppression, right? Because they're not like me.
Now, the interesting thing about this, though, is that, you know, like, who you won't hear in that list of people to have empathy for, right? It is, you know, the families of people who got like shot in the head by random illegal immigrants who have been in jail multiple times, convicted for you know, violent crimes, right? You're not going to hear him say, oh, let's have empathy for those people. Not going to hear him say, oh, let's have empathy for people who, I don't know, died of, or the families of those who have died of drug overdoses from drugs that were run across the border by illegal immigrants. Not necessarily going to hear him say, oh, let's have empathy for the women and girls who have been insulted in their bathrooms by males who came in there because they felt like they belonged there. Oh, then empathy is returning an Era 404 message. What happened there? Or maybe 403 perhaps. I don't know. But it's interesting how selective some folks on the left will be with the empathy that they're choosing to weaponize. Because the right can weaponize empathy too, and that's how the right is gaining ground on the LGBT issue, actually.
So I don't have to worry about it. And we can see a little bit more about the philosophical and political importance of this by checking out Aristotle. Now, he doesn't really talk about empathy as such, but his discussion of justice and friendship and his Nicomachean ethics is pretty helpful here. Okay, so listen to how Aristotle describes justice. He says, for this same reason, justice alone of the virtues is thought to be another's good, because it is related to our neighbor, for it does what is advantageous to another, either a ruler or a co-partner. The gist here is that to be just is to be concerned with the good of another. Justice itself, definitionally, is about me caring about and seeking the good of people that aren't just like me. This is absolutely counter to contemporary Western individualism. Aristotle writes that the best man is not he who exercises his virtue towards himself, but he who exercises it towards another, for this is a difficult task. And this is why for Aristotle, justice isn't just a part of virtue, it basically is virtue. Aristotle also talks about friendship in this text. He says that perfect friendship is the friendship of men who are good and alike in virtue. Friendship, like justice for him, is perfected when we seek out the good of another, when our friendship is derived from the desire for the other to sort of have good stuff happen to them. And I think if we consider friendship and justice together in this way, it gives us a pretty good model of social empathy. So for example, if I can acknowledge the humanity of others, then I can desire their good or desire what's good for them, and think not just about what's best or most advantageous for me as an individual, but think about my neighbors and my community as a whole. And like Aristotle said,
right. And so I think your community as a whole would be benefited by a bankrupt healthcare system and homeless tents everywhere, right? Like, yeah, the 10 cities, right? We're down with that. That's to the best of everyone, right? That's what we're going for here. I'm just checking. I'm just tracking, right? This is the empathy, right, that we're striving towards.
Says if this is how we think, well, we're basically covering the whole of virtue. So if we let this type of empathy shape how we think about politics, it's going to lead us to worry less about our individual interest, what's good for us, or I don't know, our bank account, our businesses, our electric car company, whatever it is. We're going to think about the community at large. We're going to think about the good of others. We're going to think about the good of humanity and not just me. So I don't know, for example, like if you make a ton of money, it's like lower taxes, good for me because maybe I'll pay less taxes. But if me paying my fair share, it means that other people get access to healthcare.
They have no idea what the fair share is, by the way. The fair share is more. That's what the left-wing fair share is. If you ask a leftist what the fair share is, they will never tell you. Okay, maybe some will, but most leftists will not be able to answer the question, what is your fair share? And here's the interesting thing is, I'm not upper class, but I would like to pay less taxes too. And also, there are taxes that reduce that cut taxes. There are tax cuts that affect the rich, but also affect the poor. Also affect the middle class. See, it's possible to cut taxes on more people who aren't just the rich. What about that? What a novel idea. Maybe tax cuts inherently are not a bad thing. Now, personally, if we're going for fairness, in all honesty, the only tax that I wholeheartedly support is a flat sales tax. I think I've talked about that before. I'm not going to go ad nauseum about that position, but I will say if you do a flat tax, then everyone is paying the same percentage. It's fair. It's equal. If you want to increase the tax rate or decrease the tax rate, it affects the rich and the poor the same. I think that's entirely reasonable. So, like, to say that it's unempathetic to cut taxes, like, for the rich is ridiculous, especially when the rich get more money. What do? Do they just sit on it? No. A lot of rich people, they will either reinvest it into their business. And by the way, everyone involved with those businesses are poorer than them. So it goes towards their salaries, right? Increases sales for those businesses. The people who work for those businesses, they get paid more money. Those people, they will go and buy things from stores, right? Increasing the revenue of those businesses, but also probably helping to maintain, if not boost, the careers and salaries of the people who work at those stores. Those people who are probably even poorer than them, they will go on and use that money to buy groceries or whatever, and then that boosts the grocery store industry. It's just, when you have more money in the economy, that allows and stimulates economic growth. So I think it's actually kind of interesting because for all the talk of empathy that Michael Burns is doing, it doesn't seem like he's having much empathy for the rich here, because if you put yourself in the shoes of the rich, if I have an extra few $100K lying around, maybe I will buy a Maserati, and maybe I will take that Maserati to the shop to get work done. And those people who are there, who are maybe in the middle or lower classes, will get paid more money by me. Maybe because I'm rich, I'll give them a big fat tip for working on my Maserati or whatever. Like, if you just put yourself in the shoes of people, of others who are not necessarily in the specific classes that the left tells you to have empathy for, then it would be easier to understand why people on the other side of the aisle would have the positions that they have without just strawmanning them like Michael Burns is doing here.
I don't know, maybe that's good. When I do this, I'm basically being a just friend to my whole community. To paint in super broad brushstrokes to start to wrap this one up, this really shows us the difference between the ethics of an individualist, capitalist, market-driven logic and a logic driven by the spirit of empathy and egalitarianism. Okay, I'm trying to keep this quick, but I do need to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters, especially my biggest dogs. I see y'all and I appreciate you. There's a link in the description if you want to support what I'm doing and get some.
That's crazy. Such a misleading video, and everyone here is on board with this. Like, people need to stop associating accumulation of wealth with intelligence and common sense. Who does that? Oh, that person has more common sense because he's rich. Who does that? Where are the people on the right saying, oh, look at how much common sense George Soros has? No one's doing that. What in the world? Empathy is a bug which makes you weak, says someone using their child as a living shield in public to avoid getting shot. I will say, okay, and this is what I was going to talk about, because he didn't get into this. Maybe it's because he doesn't have enough empathy for the right. But I will say that the left views empathy as a society's greatest good, and the right views I don't know if, like, objectivity as the greatest thing to pursue. There's this guy who's like a therapist on Instagram who is like really good at at talking. I think like Joe Tucci therapy or whatever. He made a reel on Instagram about this a few months ago where he broke this down expertly, how the right prefers to be more objective and to throw all empathy out when it comes to ruling, because empathy is a bad thing to consider, because empathy makes things less objective and it could get in the way of justice, which is true. But at the same time, it's good to have empathy and use it to inform your policies. It's just that if you look at how the left uses empathy, usually the empathy is used towards minorities, where on the right, if you see empathy used, it's towards the majority, which isn't always the greatest thing in the world, but that can lead to prioritizing things like public safety over the feelings of a small minority group, such as what you see with how the left has been addressing transgenderism, for example, in the public eye. Now, I know this video is going to get along in the tooth. There are so many things I could go into about this whole thing. And if you guys want me to talk more about empathy in a specific realm of American politics or a specific sector of society, let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to pursue that. I don't want this video to just go on forever, though. I don't want to be rambling for all of time. So I'm going to have to end it here. But I will say, man, like it's been a while since I watched like a full video by Michael Burns or Wisecrack, but like I didn't know that he was that bad. Like, this is actually legitimately sad. This dude has like 3 million subscribers on the main channel. This is crazy.